Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and my channel is simply called Discerning What is True. Today is the 16th day of January 2024, and I'm going to be reading the conclusion of chapter 11 of Alvin Kuhn's book, which is called The Shadow of the Third Century. He talks about what really took place. Um, this is good stuff. I'm learning a lot through all this, something they didn't teach you about in seminary. Or whatever they wanted to keep you from, sort of supposedly. Um, so let me do a couple things here to change the screen to be easier to read. So this whole background again, I want to explain to you is this guy Alvin Kuhn is basically I would say a disciple. That's a good maybe I should say a student would be better. Not a student that is of Gerald Macy, but followed him and began to gravitate to what he called deeper things, that is, deeper spiritual things. And Alvin Boyd has written many books. We haven't even got to probably even a tenth of his books. He wrote many books and pamphlets, so to speak. Gerald Macy did not write as much, but then Gerald Macy was also not as what was not as what's the word I want to say? He discovered his stuff, but it was a little bit later in life, and that's the difference because Alvin began to pick this up pretty quick in his life and began to distinguish himself as a good writer and a good thinker, and looking at what I would call the esoteric perspective of what has happened after the third century. So let's get into the conclusion of this particular book tonight, the chapter it is. Now, there is plenty of evidence to show that these sayings, which are the admitted foundations of the canonic Gospels, were not first uttered by a personal founder of Christianity, nor invented afterwards by any of his fathers. Many of them were pre-extant, prehistoric, and pre-Christian, end quote. It is going to be difficult to overthrow the logic and implications of this forthright passage when we call Eusebius' admission that the Gospels were old books of the Essenes. Yeah, the Essenes were Gnostics. That's a good way of saying it, or also an esoteric perspective. They don't believe in the what we call the humanity of Jesus, but they understood the spiritual part of who Jesus was. And this goes back to also Osiris of Egypt also. So we'll continue on. Need there be excuse for citing this long passage? It came in because it testifies on factual ground to the conversion of sublime mystical figurism into impossible history. But it presents such a lucrative pictograph of the situation and development that is to be repictured here, that it should be welcomed by those who believe that truth is worth having. This lifelong student of the Christian scriptures, in relation to their unquestioned Egyptian sources, pours out the incontestable established conviction of this knowledge, of his knowledge, to emancipate a world from baseless hallucinations. It is small wonder that the Portuguese work have been permitted to go out of print, and that every copy that finds its way to old bookshops is bought up as soon as it's discovered, some by eager and sincere students, other by persons who will see to it that it never reaches the public again. It is well to hear then the summary analysis of what this conversion produced for human society. This is based upon Lunarly. I'll just spell it for you. Luniolatry, page 2, end quote. Now a quote here also. There is nothing insane, nothing irrational in it when considered in the light of evolution and when its mode of expression by sign language is thoroughly understood. The insanity lies in mistaking it for human history or divine revelation. Mythology is the depository of man's most ancient science, and what concerns us chiefly is this: when truly interpreted once more, it is destined to be the death of those false theologians or theologicals to which it has unwittingly given birth. End quote. Massey himself carried that process of reinterpretation, which simply required the reconversion of alleged history back to allegory, and then the elucidation of its mystical connotation or towards its completion. And others are now consummating his noble efforts. It is the most important work being done in religion today. The primitive Christians, the group that fathered the so-called apostolic, that is, evangelical Christianity, and declare all other groups heretics, though in their ignorance that they were putting forth a new religion of transcendent light. Massey's well pictures their unbounded dismay when they found the evidence pouring forth that they were only revamping old Egyptian religion. Their consternation at this discovery was the incentive that drove them on to destroy all the books of ancient arcane science that would betray their telltale similarity and the true source. That's right. They decided to, instead of actually facing the truth and realizing they were wrong, they chose to do the opposite and to cover it up. They could not well scorn and scoff in paganism when they found they had its own substance and paraphernalia in their hands. You see, that would make them look pretty bad. They could not condemn it when it was that which they themselves were exalting. What actually happened, the thing that to Massey himself, as to all others, had seemed incredible and impossible when first suggested for consideration, but which his evidence left him no alternate but to accept the complete metamorphosis of figurative depreciation of esoteric truth into alleged history. It's well designed by Higgins in his particular book here, and I'll just spell it for you again, Anacalpis, Anacalpsis, page 33, end quote. Now another quote. These doctrines have been, like all the other doctrines of antiquity, gradually corrupted, incarnated, if I may be permitted to compare a word for the occasion. End quote. Another quote here. Sublime philosophical truths or attributes have become clothed with bodies and converted into living characters. Perhaps this might take its origin from a wish in those professing them to conceal them from the vulgar eye. But the cause being forgotten, all ranks of society at last come to understand them in the literal sense, their real character being lost. Or perhaps this incarnation might arise from a gradual pulling away of mankind from his high state of civilization, at which it must have arrived when those doctrines were discovered, into a state of ignorance, the produce of revolutions, or perhaps merely of the great law of change, which is in all nature seems to be eternally in operation. End quote. How completely this expresses the form and content of the analysis here presented. And can one refrain from printing Higgins' frank and faithful conclusions from this phenomenon? That the rabble were the victims of a degrading superstition, I have no doubt. This was produced by the conniveance of the ancient priests, and it is in order to reproduce this effect that the modern priests have misinterpreted the doctrines of their predecessors. By vilifying and running down the religion of the ancients, they have thought they could persuade their voluntaries that their new religion was necessary for the good of mankind, a religion which, in consequence of their corruptions, had been found to be in practice much worse and more injurious to the interests of society than the older ones. End quote. Few even of those who have been forced by their studies to this devastating and disheartening conviction have had the openness to state it and front the storm of vilification and that it would evoke, I should say. Yet it has been the conclusion, the unmistakable discernment of nearly every scholar who has covered the ground of the proper investigation of the ancient field. Not only Massey, not only Higgins, like Rennett, like Strauss, like Robertson, like Smith, Drews, D-R-E-W-S, Dupas, and Brandes, B-R-A-N-D-E-S, and Mead, and others have been charged with narrow prejudice. If the body of convictions to which one is forced by the overwhelming and harrowing record of violence, fanatism, bigotry, slaughter, imposture, and forgery is to be termed prejudice, then prejudice must for once be held both warranted and eminently desirable. None of the alleged traducers and critics of Christianity, any more than the present writers, began to study of Christian history with any other feeling than that of goodwill, if not even of high approval of the Christian religion. If the study has generated a prejudice, it's because a shocking history has had to be weighed justly to the student's scale of judgments. We have cited Allen upwards that is, forward, or right, that is, assertion that the Christian religion is the only one that has been completely founded on falsity. If intelligent men of sterling character had come to hold prejudice against Christianity, it is because they would confess to a prejudice against a record of fiction, fantasy, and futility, and insecurity, and cannibalism unmatched in human annals. Quote, prejudice, end quote, of this stamp might be essential to the salvation of humanity. If open-minded scholars came out of their study of Christianity with a decided bias or frank hostility, they must have encountered facts in their researches that superinduce such an attitude. These scholars have been prejudiced because they have first been horrified, disillusioned, and frightened by what they have seen. It may spell calamity now and in the future that there is too little of this prejudice. Christianity started out with what uninstructed zealots thought or were led to think by designating priestess was a wholly new religion of celestial truth, passed straight down from heaven itself, but which soon proved to be a conglomerate mass, one might say mess, of pre-existent pagan material, contorted out of all recognition as esoteric wisdom and presented in the light of history, end quote. It was composed of scraps and crumbs of that one, quote, true religion, end quote, proclaimed by Augustine as a already existing Christianity since Adam. But alas, the want of ability on the part of any Christian, since even Origen failed to perform with these scraps and fragments a reconstitution of the original structure or meaning, such as Culver would do in reconstructing the form of a mammoth from a tooth, a jaw, or a leg bone, doomed the new movement that went forth to save mankind with inadequate tools to condign failure. The net result was to imire the human reason into a melange of piety, zeal, and weird belief, doubt, and expectation of the speedy end of the world that makes the immediate and succeeding history of the West a nightmare of tragic ineptitude. And that is the conclusion of chapter 11 tonight. And we'll probably look at another prescription book tonight. I don't know which readings I'll do. I'll just take a break here, a water break, and maybe some supper, and then I'll do another particular one. But thank you for being here for the short video. And we'll look at either chapter 12 of the book called The Shadow of the Third Century, or I may just continue on with the works of Gerald Massey's also tonight. Again, Massey's works are here in front of me right here. I have it. Got it through what I call Interjournal Library loan. This is a good book. I see it is. It's an older book, but it's been reprinted. I think the printing was done by Samuel Weisler. That is in 1974, it says here. So I guess it was be a reprinting or reprinting of the original work is what I'm gathering. So anyway, let you be here. Thank you for staying tuned, and wish you a good night, and you take care.